Creating a thinking environment isn't a one-off exercise, it's a cultural practice. For it to take root, the habits of time to think need to become part of how the organization measures success and how leaders behave every day. In this section, we'll look at some simple metrics and habits that help make that shift visible, ways to track how often people are actually creating the space to think, listen, and reflect together. These aren't compliance measures, they're awareness tools, gentle indicators that show whether attention, equality, and ease are truly becoming part of how your organization thinks and works. Building a thinking environment isn't about running a single exercise. It's about creating habits that become culture. To embed these principles into daily working life, leaders need simple, visible ways to track progress, not to audit people, but to keep awareness alive. The first metric is the percentage of meetings that start with a round. This single habit, everyone speaking once before anyone speaks twice, is the strongest signal of equality and inclusion. When a team begins most meetings this way, you know the culture is shifting toward fairness and attention. The second metric is interruption count trending down. This one's powerful because it measures respect in action. Fewer interruptions mean more listening, less ego, and better thinking. You can track this informally. Just notice, are people finishing their sentences more often? Are silences longer? Those are signs of progress. Third, look at speaking time distribution. In many teams, 20% of people speak 80% of the time. When you start seeing a more balanced pattern where every voice contributes, it shows that equality and psychological safety are taking root. The fourth habit is maintaining the 5-to-1 appreciation to critique ratio. Nancy Kline reminds us that minds think best in an atmosphere of appreciation. When people regularly hear genuine recognition before critique, they become braver and more creative. The easiest way to build this is to end meetings by asking, what do we appreciate about how we work together today? The fifth metric is the explicit use of incisive questions in decision-making. This is where culture meets practice. Notice how often someone asks, what are we assuming? Or, is that true always? Or, if we knew X, what would we do? When these questions start appearing naturally in discussions, you can see that deep thinking has become habitual. And finally, conduct regular leader habit check-ins. Are leaders modeling attention, ease, equality, and appreciation in their meetings and one-to-one conversations? Culture changes when leaders model it consistently and visibly. Together, these indicators form what I call a scorecard of consciousness. They don't just measure performance, they measure the quality of presence inside your organization. When you see these numbers and behaviors trending in the right direction, you'll know something profound is happening. People are not just working together, they're thinking together.
Metrics only matter if they turn into habits. The aim is not measurement for its own sake, but to create rituals that reinforce equality, ease, and appreciation every day. Start small. Begin every meeting with a quick round, even 60 seconds each. That small ritual signals presence and sets a different tone for everything that follows. Track interruptions as a lighthearted metric. You can even nominate a rotating observer whose job is to celebrate progress. We had half as many interruptions this week. Use data if you have it. Some virtual meeting platforms can show speaking time distribution. Review it periodically and ask whose voices are missing. Turn appreciation into a closing ritual, a quick round of, what do you appreciate about this discussion or this team today? And finally, make reflection routine. Once a quarter, ask your leadership team, where did incisive questions help us make better decisions this quarter? Over time, these small habits, rounds, listening, appreciation, and reflection, become the invisible architecture of a thinking culture. They don't just change meetings, they change minds.
This thinking culture scorecard gives leaders and teams a simple, visual way to sustain the principles of the thinking environment in daily practice. It's not a compliance checklist, it's a mirror. It reflects how often and how intentionally we're creating the conditions for high-quality thinking. Let's walk through each of the 6 metrics. The first is the percentage of meetings that start with a round. This is your leading indicator of equality. If most meetings begin with everyone speaking once before anyone speaks twice, you've embedded fairness into the fabric of your culture. The second metric, interruption count trending down, is a measure of listening discipline. When interruptions decrease, it means people are feeling safe enough to pause and think, rather than compete for airtime. Third, speaking time distribution. In every team, there's a natural tendency for a few voices to dominate. By tracking how airtime is shared, even informally, you can gauge how well you're balancing participation and inclusion. Many virtual platforms can show this automatically, but a facilitator can also note who speaks and for how long. The fourth metric is the 5-to-1 appreciation to critique ratio. This one is cultural gold. When appreciation outweighs criticism, people feel safe enough to take risks, to think boldly, and to speak truthfully. You can track this simply by noticing, are we thanking, acknowledging, and appreciating as often as we are evaluating? Fifth, the explicit use of incisive questions in decisions. This is where the culture shows up in real-time problem solving. Are leaders and teams regularly asking, what are we assuming? Or, is that true always? The more often these questions appear naturally, the deeper the thinking quality across the organization. And finally, the leader behavior check. Every leader can self-assess or ask peers, am I modeling attention? Do I create ease? Do I make space for equality and appreciation in every interaction? When leaders live these principles, culture change accelerates. The purpose of the scorecard is to build conscious habits. You don't need to score every box every week. Just reviewing it monthly or quarterly keeps awareness alive. It ensures the thinking environment doesn't stay in the training room, but lives in daily leadership practice. Over time, you'll see trends. Interruptions fall. Rounds become routine. Appreciation becomes natural. And that's when you know the culture has shifted from one of reaction to one of reflection, from busyness to brilliance. To bring this scorecard to life, use it as a learning conversation, not an audit. Review it monthly or quarterly with your leadership or project teams. Celebrate the wins. For example, we've started 90% of our meetings with a round this month. Don't treat it as judgment. Treat it as awareness. Pair each metric with a simple reinforcing habit. For rounds, start every meeting with one question. For interruptions, appoint an attention champion each week. For appreciation, close meetings with a quick appreciation round. Rotate who observes or reports. Equality applies here too. Encourage people to notice what's changing, not just what's missing. Add stories alongside data. Numbers show progress, but stories show meaning. Because we slowed down, we avoided a poor decision. Most importantly, keep it light. The goal is consciousness, not control. Over time, the scorecard becomes less about tracking and more about remembering. Remembering that attention, ease, and equality are not just meeting techniques, but ways of being that bring out people's finest thinking.
These are the real indicators that a thinking environment is taking root. Notice that every metric here is behavioral. It's something you can observe, not just count. When most meetings begin with a round, when interruptions decline, and when appreciation outweighs critique, you can sense the change immediately. Balanced speaking time shows that equality and safety are being lived, not just discussed. And when incisive questions start appearing naturally in everyday decision-making, you know people are beginning to think more clearly for themselves. Above all, watch the leaders. When they model attention and ease, when they stay calm under pressure and listen fully, others follow. These are the quiet metrics of transformation. Small shifts in habit that show an organization has moved from talking about thinking to living it. Well, that brings us to the end of this section on metrics and habits. We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you on the next one.